of sovereignty is resolved and who is called to exercise it, there should be a supranational, an international entity endowed with means adequate to ensure the preservation of the special characteristics of the city, its holy places, the freedom to visit them, its religious and ethnic communities, a guarantee of their essential liberties, and its city plan. The Apostolic Nuncio recalled the establishment of diplomatic relations between the Holy See and Israel in 1993, when both signed the Fundamental Agreement. He noted Article 4 of this agreement where both the Holy See and Israel affirmed their continuing commitment to the status quo in the Christian holy places. He also spoke of the problem sparked by Israel's recent authorization of a project for the construction of settlements in occupied territory in East Jerusalem, for which there was widespread international condemnation. This issue, he reminded those present, was brought before the UN Security Council on March 7 and March 21 of this year, but without resolution because the sole country on the Security Council which opposed the resolution was the United States. An emergency session of the General Assembly, organized only 93rd times in the history of the United Nations, was held on April 24 to 25. The Holy See delegation was contacted and asked for suggestions for a resolution, Archbishop Martino said. And he recounted the meetings, rough drafts of proposals and negotiations which followed. The approved texts of the eventual resolution, he underlined, contained those points championed by the Holy See. The General Assembly has here called for internationally guaranteed provisions, the equivalent of the internationally guaranteed special status called for by Pope John Paul II. This is particularly noteworthy because in this case, the Arab delegations all voted for this resolution and therefore for this provision. The holy places within Jerusalem, concluded Archbishop Martino, are not merely museum relics to be opened and closed by the dominant political authority, no matter who that might be at any given moment. They are living shrines precious to the hearts and faith of believers. Des Status Jerusalem/UN Martino Vis 970,616, 640. Could that supranational entity which will oversee the international city of Jerusalem be the Vatican, just as Perez promised? And how do we react to Jerusalem Mayor Ehud Olmert's recent announcement that he will begin negotiations with the Vatican, but only over holy sites? 2. The Vatican versus the Priory of Sion. Concurrent with the Vatican's negotiations for authority over the old city of Jerusalem, others who would also establish a claim to the throne of David have a covetous eye on the Holy Land. The Priory of Sion appears to be the hierarchy of a vast network of organizations which make up a secret brotherhood that covers the globe. There are a great many secret societies in operation, Charles Notier declares. But there is one, he adds, that takes precedence over all others, that in fact presides over all others. According to Notier, this supreme secret society is called the Philadelphies. At the same time, however, he speaks of the oath which forbids me to make them known under their social name. Nevertheless, there is a hint of the Priory of Sion, 31 to 152. According to Rosicrucian book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, this august body has maintained a low profile from its inception and remains behind the scenes orchestrating critical events in Western history. The Priory of Sion exists today and is still operative. It is influential and plays a role in high-level international affairs as well as in the domestic affairs of certain European countries. 3. The Priory also claims to be the guardians of the Holy Grail, the sacred icon of the Merovingian bloodline which blasphemously purports to be the blood descendants of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene. According to another popular Grail book, Bloodline of the Holy Grail by Lawrence Gardner, the Merovingian dynasty derives its name from the 5th century King Merov of France, a descendant of the mystical Fisher kings, who was reportedly sired by the mysterious sea beast, the Beast of Neptunus, as symbolically defined in the Merovingian ancestry. The relevant Sea Lord was King Pallas, a god of old Arcadia. The immortal Sea Lord was said to be ever incarnate in a dynasty of ancient kings whose symbol was a fish, as was the traditional symbol of Jesus. 4. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Reverend 13-1. The dynasty of Merovingian kings reigned over Europe from the 5th to the 8th centuries, but was removed from power in 751 AD by a document called the Donation of Constantine, created for the express purpose of overthrowing this heretical dynasty of pagan kings. According to Cyril Lawrence Gardner's Realm of the Ring Lords, however, the document was a fraud. It is important to consider the original document which made church kingship possible in the first place. Because the implementation of this particular document some 1,248 years ago led to just about every social injustice that has been experienced in the Christian world. The document to which I refer is called the Donation of Constantine. All monarchical and governmental practice has, for centuries, been based on the initial precept of this charter, but the precept is invalid. There are those in our midst today who, under the dynasty rule of Grail entitlement, are rightful kings and queens. When the donation made its first appearance in the middle 8th century, it was alleged to have been written by Emperor Constantine 400 years earlier, although, strangely, never produced in the interim. It was even dated and carried his supposed signature. What the document proclaimed was that the Pope was Christ's selected representative on earth, with the power to create kings as his subordinates. The provisions were put into operation by the Vatican in 751, whereupon the long-standing Merovingians were deposed and a whole new dynasty was supplemented by way of a family who had hitherto been mayors of the royal palace, the equivalent of prime ministers. They were dubbed Carolinians, and their only king of any consequence was the legendary Charlemagne. During the Middle Ages, the Priory of Sion determined to re-establish the Merovingian bloodline as the royalty of Europe. The avowed and declared objective of the Priory of Sion is the restoration of the Merovingian dynasty and bloodline, not only to the throne of France, but to the thrones of other European nations as well. 3. In 1095, the Priory of Sion, having infiltrated and secured the patronage of the Roman Catholic Church, created the Order of the Knights of the Temple. Pope Urban II commissioned the Knights Templar to conduct the First Crusade, ostensibly to protect pilgrims to the Holy Land. During this crusading era, various knightly orders merged, including the Ordre de Sion, Order of Sion, founded by Godefroy de Bouillon in 1099. From 1188, the Order of Sion had been restructured, and evolved to pursue a more specific course of loyalty to the Merovingian lineage of France. In practice, the two operated in close association because they were essentially concerned with the same root bloodline, 29 to 256,323. In actuality, the Merovingians intended to occupy the Holy Land and the Temple of Jerusalem in order to re-establish their dynasty as royal heirs of the Messianic lineage. It seems that the Roman authorities did not recognize the messianic claim of the Merovingian lords but viewed the cult with a morbid suspicion of ulterior motives. During the latter years of the declining empire, the greatest of all threats to the Roman Church rose from a despotic royal strain in Gaul. They were the Merovingian dynasty. 5. There is a pronounced anti-Catholic bias in all Merovingian literature which presages the outcome of this campaign for the seat of authority in Jerusalem. Revelation 17 does indicate that, for a brief period, there will be a global merger of church and state to establish a world government. During this unholy alliance, the great harlot, the Roman Catholic Church, will ride the beast drunken with the blood of the saints and with the martyrs of Jesus. However, after she hath glorified herself, and lived wantonly, then suddenly the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. The authors of Holy Blood, Holy Grail give a further clue as to why the Priory of Sion would ally with the Vatican and later break faith. In 1314, Pope Clement V and King Philippe IV of France martyred the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, Jacques de Molay. As the smoke from the slow fire choked the life from his body, Jacques de Molay is said to have issued an imprecation from the flames. According to tradition, he called his persecutors, Pope Clement and King Philip, to join him and account for themselves before the court of God within the year. Within a month Pope Clement was dead. By the end of the year Philip was dead as well. There is, of course, no need to look for supernatural explanations. The Templars possessed great expertise in the use of poisons, and there were certainly enough people about ... to exact the appropriate vengeance. Nevertheless, the apparent fulfillment of the Grand Master's curse lent credence to belief in the order's occult powers. Nor did the curse end there. 6. Authors Bagent, Lee and Lincoln proposed that the French Revolution was perpetrated by the successors of the Knights Templar — the French Freemasons, to exact vengeance for the death of their Grand Master. The insinuation is plain that the final and appropriate vengeance toward the Vatican will be forthcoming when the Merovingian dynasty asserts its authority over its world kingdom. They propose that, in place of the Vatican papacy, a royal heir of Merovingian descent, the King of the Jews will be the real Pope and Patriarch of an international church. The Priory of Sion's objectives include ... a theocratic United States of Europe, a trans- or pan-European confederation assembled into a modern empire and ruled by a dynasty descended from Jesus. This dynasty would not only occupy a throne of political or secular power, but quite conceivably the throne of St. Peter as well. Under that supreme authority there might then be an interlocking network of kingdoms or principalities, connected by dynastic alliances and intermarriage, a kind of 20th-century feudal system, but without the abuses usually associated with that term. And the actual process of governing would presumably reside with the Priory of Sion, which might take the form of, say, a European Parliament endowed with executive and or legislative privileges. In a very real sense the time is right for the Priory to show its hand. The political systems and ideologies that in the early years of our century seemed to promise so much have virtually all displayed a degree of bankruptcy. Communism, socialism, fascism, capitalism, Western-style democracy have all, in one way or another, betrayed their promise, jaundiced their adherents, and failed to fulfill the dreams they engendered. There is a longing for a renewed sense of the sacred that amounts, in effect, to a full-scale religious revival, exemplified by the proliferation of sects and cults, for example, and the swelling tide of fundamentalism in the United States. There is also a desire for a true leader, not a Führer, but the species of wise and benign spiritual figure, a priest-king in whom mankind can safely repose its trust. There are many devout Christians who do not hesitate to interpret the apocalypse as nuclear holocaust. How might the advent of Jesus' lineal descendant be interpreted? To a receptive audience, it might be a kind of second coming. 7. According to the authors of Holy Blood, Holy Grail. The text of the Protocols, of the Elders of Sion, ends with a single statement, signed by the representatives of Sion of the 33rd degree. 31 to 193. These infamous protocols, they claim, have been slanderously misrepresented and are, instead of an evil conspiracy, a humanitarian proposal authored by the elite Priory of Sion. In other words, the proposed New World Order of the Priory will be a benevolent Masonic kingdom led by a new king of the Holy Seed of David. The Grand Master of the Priory of Sion at any given point in history, is considered to be the Grail King and the Messiah. A revived Merovingian empire who will be the heir apparent of the purported royal bloodline of Jesus, deemed worthy to sit on the throne of the kingdoms of this world. Holy Blood, Holy Grail provides the names of several noble families of Merovingian heritage, which include the following. We cannot point to one man and assert that he is Jesus' lineal descendant. There are at least a dozen families in Britain and Europe today, with numerous collateral branches, who are of Merovingian lineage. These include the houses of Habsburg, Lorraine, present titular dukes of Lorraine and kings of Jerusalem, Plantard, Luxembourg, Montpezat, Montesquieu, and various others. According to the Port documents, the Sinclair family in Britain is also allied to the bloodline